friends. Today I will be explaining how Rosa Parks changed history. By standing up to racial segregation, one woman changed history for countless people, both African American and otherwise. The year was 1955. On December 1st, a woman was asked to move from her seat to make room for a white man. Her response was a simple no. Little did she know that one word, that small stand for what she believed in, would change history forever. To understand the significance of her sacrifice, we need to start at the very beginning. While it may seem hard to believe, throughout history the color of people's skins made their lives much more difficult in many cases. When people first walked the earth, it didn't take very long for them to discover a way to get work done quickly. Evidence of slavery can be found from up to 11,000 years ago. Throughout history, most of these slaves were African. It wasn't until after the Civil War in 1865 that the terrible act of forcing someone to work against their will was finally made illegal in America. You may think that the problems would be over for Africans, but the truth is, in many countries, slavery was still legal and was still practiced. Even in America, African Americans still had many problems to deal with. They weren't treated equally, for one thing. Many people refused to let African Americans eat at their restaurants. Many people also didn't allow them to work in their businesses. Another problem was racial segregation. Before the United States Supreme Court struck down this separate but equal rule, there were many problems. African Americans would have to go to different schools, use different restrooms, and even drink from different water fountains. These are just a few of the many ways African Americans were separated from white people. While the separate part of the separate but equal was true, the equal part was not exactly true in all cases. If there were two restrooms, one for white people and one for African Americans, the white restroom would almost always be nicer and kept cleaner. If there were two schools, the school reserved for white people would be likely to be bigger, nicer, and to have better educational programs. In general, the things reserved for white people were far nicer than the things that were reserved for the African Americans. You may be asking yourself, why isn't the world like this today? Well, a lot has changed since then. One of these changes happened on February 4th, 1913, when Rosa Parks was born to James Macaulay and Leona Edwards. Parks grew up in Montgomery, Alabama, where she attended the Industrial School for Girls. She was a very good student, but eventually she needed to drop out in order to take care of her sick grandmother. Throughout her life, she had to suffer through various laws that segregated African Americans from white people. Rosa Parks did not support these laws, including the one that said that African Americans needed to sit in the back of the bus while the white people were allowed to sit in the front. One afternoon, after a long day at work, Rosa Parks sat down in the back of a public bus in the African Americans designated section. The seats filled up, and a few white people were left without a seat. When the bus driver noticed, he got very upset. He stormed to the back of the bus and demanded that 4 African Americans give up their seats to allow the white people to sit down. 3 of them obeyed and gave up their seats, but Rosa Parks made a decision to stand up for what she believed, that they were all equal. In Rosa Parks' autobiography, she states the following: "People always say that I didn't give up my seat because I was tired, but that isn't true. I was not tired physically, or no more tired than I usually was at the end of a working day. I was not old, although some people have an image of me being old then. I was 42. No, the only tired I was tired of giving in." After Rosa Parks stood up to the bus driver, she was arrested. After she was later bailed out of jail, news of what had happened spread. Although she wasn't the first to stand up to the unfair segregation, it inspired many people. Her inspiration led to something even bigger. A bus boycott began. although it may not have been a big deal for only a few people to boycott it, a whopping 35,000 African Americans boycotted the buses. When the buses lost that many people, it would destroy their businesses. Rosa Parks was certainly not the only person who was willing to stand up for what they believed in. Each day, more and more boycotts began to take place. Each day, more and more nonviolent protests began to take place. The civil rights movement had begun. Each day, more and more African Americans joined the movement. In fact, many white people joined the movement as well. The businesses that refused to treat African Americans well were now suffering greatly from loss of business. These businesses had a choice to either treat African Americans fairly or go out of business completely. When people think of civil rights leaders, names such as Martin Luther King Jr., Thurgood Marshall, and the Little Rock Nine might come to mind. Well, it was Rosa Parks' actions that inspired Martin Luther King Jr. and the rest of the civil rights leaders. This is the reason why she is often considered the mother of the civil rights movement. In 1968, President Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act of 1968. This act prohibited racial segregation. Over the years, African Americans have been given the rights that they deserve. Now African Americans can attend the same schools, ride the same buses, have the same jobs, and do many other things the same way white people do. You may be wondering, just how far have we come? Well, African Americans went from being slaves to holding important and well-respected jobs such as doctors, lawyers, and even leaders of our country such as Barack Obama and Haram Rhodes Revels. They're no longer separated and have the same rights as anyone else. The world has definitely changed for the better, and it all started on that day when Rosa Parks took a stand against racial segregation.